On today's episode, we have Ryan Scolnik. He's the head of data science at FortressIQ. We're going to discuss him being the first data science hire, transitioning from an IC to a manager, and the importance of letting your ego go. Enjoy the show. Hey, Ryan, thanks for being on. Feel free to tell the audience a little bit about yourself.
Hey, Arash. First of all, thanks for having me. Really appreciate the opportunity here. And yeah, as you said, I am the head of data science here at FortressIQ and was also the first data science hire. FortressIQ is a software as a service company that is leveraging computer vision and machine learning to understand digital processes at enterprises and then drive organizational change there. Before FortressIQ, I was a senior member of the data science team at Sense, which is a predictive intelligence company in the business-to-business marketing and sales space. And before that, I was at an analytics shop at JP Chase, where I think I have the biggest claim to fame, which is filling everyone's mailbox with a $500 open a Chase checking account mailer that I'm sure everyone's thrown away.
So that's why I went out and got a Chase account, right?
Yeah, exactly.
I have to send you a thank you card.
Definitely. Keep my eyes open for that one.
Yeah, no, for sure. Yeah, I know going into any org, and especially when you're the first hire, that's a little bit, I guess, nerve-wracking, or, there can be a lot of expectations and pressure, or it could also just be a lot of fun and excitement since nobody's there and nobody knows what's kind of going on. I know at FortressIQ, you're the first data science hire. So I was curious just how that experience was. That you're actually employee number 4. So let alone the first data science hire, you were one of the first 5 people that joined the company. Just how did that experience go initially for you?
It's been a great experience and I've learned a ton. But being employee 4, joining a company right after their seed round with really just an idea, right? No product, no data, no customers, and a couple engineers and a data scientist and a CEO. And really, taking an idea and running with it and trying to, do both a proof of concept and showcase it to other investors, to potential customers, all the while growing from 4 to 7, moving from a corner office in one building to, a 10-person office in a WeWork, to finally getting your own office and, owning or at least renting a place that was only FortressIQ's. We're now at almost 70 employees. So it's been a great run to go from 4 to 70 and kind of watch the company and the product grow.
Yeah, I bet it's kind of like, I don't have kids, but just I can imagine from, being born to then taking their first step and then the first day, school, and then eventually they graduated, kind of the same progression, I guess, exists, joining a new company too.
Absolutely.
Awesome. I know when you go in, obviously your job is to really kind of set the tone from a data perspective. I wanted to touch on finding data versus simulated data. I know, people go in and there's a lot to be done. What's your take on the strategy that you employed going in and kind of the difference there?
Yeah. So like I said, FortressIQ is using both computer vision and machine learning. So we have kind of both avenues where we were, without data, and starting this company. And the question was, well, how do we get data to kind of prove out this idea and build the product? And we went back and forth and simulating, gathering data. And, I think that was a big learning opportunity for us to say, what data is out there? And that's where we started, which was, what open source images are there that are digital images? So, screenshots from computers, software, manuals. There's a big born digital data set out there that's an open source data set. What are the academics doing? Where in the academic space? Computer vision has been very strong in the academic space. What data is out there that academics are using? And then, seeing what we could do with that, but then realizing that we also needed to simulate our own data on the computer vision side. And that's where we were looking at open source design systems where we could basically mimic UIs of common softwares and being able to randomize that data and simulate a bunch of UIs that were using open source components was huge on the computer vision side. And then we did the same thing on the more standard machine learning side where we were looking at log files. the same approach where what is the academic space looking at and what kind of open source data is there out there that has been published and is accessible? And then how do we supplement that with simulated data and being able to kind of reconstruct human behavior, which is what we were trying to do using simulation and synthetic data. So, trying to balance both what's out there in the academic space, but then how do you supplement that with simulated data to really, flesh out your entire data set to really maximize your generalizability, right? Because at the end of the day, we really wanted a model and ML and CV algorithms that were going to be able to generalize really well.
Yeah, so it sounds like making sure you take a look at what's out there first is always a good rule of thumb. I know people just get excited. They just want to go build. They want to go just kind of off into the simulated world. But finding out what's out there first really allowed you guys then to be able to get a whole kind of 360 approach to everything you needed.
Exactly. So we could supplement whatever was out there with our own simulated data. I think that's where you start looking at, what assumptions are you making around your product? What are the requirements that your algorithms are going to have to fulfill? And can they be built using the data that's out there? And if not, how do you supplement that with simulated data? My biggest example is like, I always say this to people like, is a button a button a button? Is a button in Salesforce the same thing as a button in Excel is the same thing as a button in Zoom? And, everyone answers that question a little bit differently. And how do you make sure that you have that diversity that, you can feed to a model and train?
I think that is an important lesson for folks to learn. I guess being so close to the founders as kind of an early member of a team, how do you think that helped you kind of shape your initiatives and kind of you making the right assumptions? Do you think that kind of communication and that ability to just be in the same room with them gave you that leg up and just kind of understanding the business aspect of what they were trying to drive?
Yeah, absolutely. So our founder and CEO is, a super curious individual and is always trying to push the envelope. And, he would be putting academic papers on my desk, every day saying like, hey, have you read this paper? Hey, have you seen the data they're using? You know, can we do something similar? Or does this apply to our space? And, that curiosity and that drive to like really go out and expand your horizon and learn about as much as you can was really the driver in those first 6 to 9 months of how do you learn as much as possible about a space that you're new to, that you're trying to break into, and how do you make sure that you're from the data side and the data science side covering as many bases as possible. And I would say that curiosity and that drive to always be learning is something that we strive for at Fortress IQ in general.
Yeah, I think depending on whatever industry you're in, whatever your job is, or just in life in general, I think curiosity keeps sparking new initiatives and pushes mankind and the human brain forward. So stay curious, everyone out there.
Yeah, never be bored. Never be bored.
And if you are, find a way to be unbored, I guess, and ask questions. I was
Absolutely.
curious. I know probably if you could go back, there's definitely lessons learned having been the first hire. Is there anything that comes to mind that maybe like if you could get another crack at it, you would have done a little bit differently or any advice you'd give yourself again if you had to go back?
One of the first things that comes to mind is, if you can leverage something that's pre-built and already kind of fleshed out and leverage that in your pipeline, when you're first starting out, leverage it. Don't try to reinvent the wheel on things that, could take months or be blockers to your pipeline or further development of your actual product. So finding those pre-built or open source opportunities and leveraging those early, I think could have saved us a couple months of development time in that early stage. And then, the other thing is I look at the data that we simulated and, how much noise and, all of the assumptions we made and really data is king, right? And we got our first customer and immediately started focusing on like, how do we solve the customer's problem, our very first customer's problem, and kind of neglected the continued simulation. And I really wish we would have gone back and really honed in on, do we have the right data? Do we have enough of the right data? And not gotten too focused in on our first customer.
Gotcha. Okay, well, a little bit of balance of paying attention to the folks that are paying the bills, but then also kind of overall keeping that holistic approach of making sure everything you're doing is going to be applicable moving forward too.
Yeah, absolutely. Got to have those customers for sure. But, Also have to have good algorithms.
Of course, of course. Got to have both. I know it's definitely a different life when you are a manager versus, a individual contributor, versus a VP versus CEO, right? Everybody has different responsibilities and different roles. For you particularly, when you made that transition to a manager, how did your day-to-day change?
The biggest change, and I still get some grief from some of my employees where they're like, you have no free time on your calendar. And really it's just the number of meetings and making sure that you're communicating really well with everyone else at the more leadership side of things and driving the company, and making sure that everyone at that level is on the right page, and being able to disseminate that back to your team was super important. So the first thing is, a lot more calls, a lot more meetings, a lot less development. I still get to commit code every once in a while, but it's very few and far between. And now it's much more planning, setting goals, tracking how we're progressing on our key results, and a lot less of coding and, committing to our code base, I guess.
Did you think that was going to be the case when you made that transition, or were you kind of caught off guard that you weren't coding nearly as much and you were just inundated with a lot more meetings?
It gradually got into more and more meetings, as our company got bigger and bigger. I think one of the things that was helpful was with our first couple data science hires, I was really focused on getting a good onboarding plan in terms of how do I get this employee up to speed as quick as possible, but also, as successful as possible. And I spent a lot of time, setting up a 3-month onboarding plan that, we started with the first employee and kind of iterated on as we grew the data science team, and making sure that that was in place was super important. And as that happened, while that was happening, we were hiring more people across the board. And, a lot of those meetings were interviews in the beginning, right? As you're starting to build a team, you're interviewing a whole lot more people, and you're also interviewing for other teams as well.
That onboarding process, do you tap into the folks on your team to ask them kind of their opinions on and get feedback, or what do you do to keep honing in on it and making it better?
So essentially, I came up with this first one that I thought really captured both a personnel and also a data science aspect to it. So, first is connect. And my thing is connect to the people around you and connect your hardware, right? There's two sides to it. And then it's commit to learning the company, learning the product, learning the business, but also commit code to our code base. Develop relationships, and also develop the part of the software that you're going to be responsible for. And then lastly, contribute. And kind of each one of those stages has, success criteria, and making sure that we edited those and kind of iterated on those as every single employee came through. I'll tell you that list has gotten longer, shorter. It's changed with every single employee, but it's still in place. And I will continue to iterate on it as we continue to grow the team and as we continue to get bigger. But yeah, everyone's gotten to contribute and give feedback, and that's part of the after your 3 months, how do I change this? And is there new software, right? Is there new software that you have to install? We got to add that to the list. What else did we miss? Could we make it better? And all that. So I think if you asked every single one of my employees, they would say that they could point to one or two things that they've added to the onboarding process.
Yeah, it's awesome. And I think, regardless of what the size of your team is, getting feedback in that loop just allows you to make adjustments. And those adjustments are coming from the people that you're actually onboarding and managing. So who better to get that feedback from? You just have to be open to that dialogue. And I know you had mentioned with the influx of more meetings, the communication, getting back to your team and making sure you're articulating kind of the key points from what you were discussing in meetings and getting it back to them. That's been a key success criteria for you. So I wanted you just to touch on kind of that and what you do and what you're looking to listen to in those meetings to then get that back to your team.
Yeah. So, if there are meetings that are at the high level, I'm obviously trying to gauge what moves the needle for each kind of stakeholder in the room. And, I'm trying to digest, how can I move the most needles with my team? And then, being able to digest that and bring it back to the team is always a challenge. You know, being able to prioritize, the different stakeholders has always been a challenge for me. I know I can make a big impact on maybe the sales engineering side, but I know that the CEO has a priority on the infrastructure side. And, how do I kind of balance those competing requirements has been challenging. The other thing is that sometimes it's beneficial to bring one or two members of the team into a meeting and let them hear as well. Let them be kind of like a silent observer, just so that they can also hear and get a little spin on what I'm hearing. And so making sure that they're exposed and hearing what everyone wants and needs has also been kind of a successful tactic that I've taken.
Yeah, I think always hearing directly from the horse's mouth always is a little bit better than hearing secondhand. So I think whenever those opportunities present itself, I think also people like to know that they're getting involved at that higher level meeting whenever applicable. So I think that's a great strategy.
Yeah, and I think it comes from that, again, from the onboarding, which is you've got to connect. Week one, you've got to connect. You should know everyone, and one of my goals is that everyone should know who's on the data science team. If everyone knows that when they see that person in the hallway that they're on the data science team, like I've kind of been successful on the onboarding. I know that most people, data science doesn't always have like the social element and maybe not always extroverted, but being able to, at least connect with those individuals in whatever way you can has been super, I think, helpful in our team's success.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, data scientists are touching a lot of stakeholders. So the more people they know, I'm sure it'll help in pestering them for data points or any pieces of information that can help you guys model better. I know you'd mentioned transitioning, and I think something that lacks a lot of times just overall is you've never been a manager before, right? And by the course of the company growing, you kind of move into the role. I know for you particularly, you wanted to make sure that you were successful in being a manager. So you sought out a kind of professional development coach to kind of help, I think, probably with any gaps or any areas that you didn't feel as confident in. So I thought that one was great self awareness on your part to do that. And I wanted to hear kind of in your own words, what made you do that, kind of what you gained from that experience? Because I think there's a lot of people out there that might have never been a manager and are going to get promoted and they kind of, are tossed into the deep end and they're trying to learn how to swim. So I was kind of curious how that experience was for you.
Yeah, I think it kind of all started, back when I was at Chase, where, everyone that was a brand new hire at Chase was assigned a mentor. And you were assigned a mentor that was much more senior than you, that had been around. And what you learn from a mentorship is that you don't know everything, and there's always something to learn. And similar to what we were saying earlier about never being bored and always being curious and always wanting to learn, when you go into a management role and you've never managed before, you're going to have to learn, right? And some learning is going to happen on the job, but other learning you're going to have to supplement with other sources. And there are professional coaches for a reason. I think if you look at a lot of executives, they all have professional coaches, and it's not a sign of weakness in any way, shape, or form, right? And I think of it as a great opportunity for me to bounce ideas that I have off of my coach to get, advice on how I handled certain situations, you know, obviously tips and tricks to kind of everything that you're going to see in the management side of things, whether it's, managing down, managing up, managing your peers. There's always something to be learned, and leveraging a professional coach was definitely a great avenue for me.
Yeah, I think a lot of people asking for help or seeking it, they, to your point, they think it's a sign of weakness. And I think if you're ever seeking help, that's a sign of a strength, right? So you are looking to improve, you want to be held accountable. So I think it's fantastic, even at an IC level, regardless of where you're at in the org, everybody and anybody can always be improving. So seeking out mentorship or people that you trust, that you think are doing a good job and you're trying to kind of follow in some footsteps and learn from is always very critical. But I do think that trust component and who you choose to mentor or be menteed by is critical to ensuring a good working relationship too.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, some of your best relationships are going to be made in the workplace, and whether it's at your company or whether it's through mentorship or professional organizations, being able to seek out those connections and really nurture them is critical.
Awesome. Yeah, I know a lot of engineers or data scientists, they love modeling, they love coding. And I know when you go into more of a manager or management position, that kind of gets taken away from you a little bit. And I know then you really have to put trust in your team and also trust in yourself that you've surrounded yourself with a good team that's going to do what they need to do. So I was curious in that regards when you have the team there. I know letting go of ego from a development standpoint is difficult. So I wanted you to touch on kind of that process and what people need to do when they do transition to being a manager to kind of letting some things go and putting trust in your team.
Absolutely. I love my team. They're the best part of my job. And, I've had the luxury of, hiring my entire team. And in hiring your entire team, I have hired people smarter than me. And I believe that. And I believe in them that they can do, take whatever I've done in the first 6 or 9 months and really take it to the next level. And that's why we grew. But, hiring them, getting them onboarded, and then trusting them to take you to the next level is, the fundamental like reason why we've been successful, I believe. And you're right. Part of that is, not letting your ego get in the way. I'll steal a quote from someone that's like, no ego amigo, where just, don't have an ego and realize that you're better off as a team than you are as an individual. And it's not a competition. It's really about camaraderie, collaboration. And, quite frankly, a lot of my code doesn't even exist in the code base anymore. My team has legitimately taken it to the next level. And I'm proud of that. Right. And I think that's the kind of flip you have to put on it as a manager is that you may have laid the groundwork, but making your team successful is the best thing that you can do. And really, you know, not being emotionally connected to your code or, what you built in the past is super important. And then making sure that your employees also feel that way, where, if they start something, but another employee picks it up, they're only making it better. Right. And, you'll get the opportunity on another project.
Do you feel like the more your team and the company's goals are articulated and really used as a driver, that helps kind of get those emotions away because you're kind of connecting what work you're doing to a bigger purpose? I find sometimes without that bigger purpose known where kind of everybody is rowing, it kind of has everybody going their own way. But if you're able to harness that, then I think it might make getting people less attached to their code easier.
We've seen some quarters where I would say we weren't as directed and maybe we didn't have tangible metrics or key results or anything that we were striving for. And those were maybe less successful quarters. But, when we do have the, product roadmap and we have the layout of like, what do we want to deliver in this month or this quarter, the team has really knocked it out of the park. And that's where they've thrived the most. And I know that's something that I've learned over the last, year or so is, if I can get those metrics and if I can get the ship going in the right direction, that's what really makes the team click.
Gotcha. You got to know where you're going. And if you do, you can get there a lot faster and happier, it sounds like.
Absolutely.
Awesome. Hey, Ryan, it's been great chatting with you. If anybody's interested to, ask you a question or touch base with you, I'm guessing LinkedIn would be the best place to reach you at.
Yeah, LinkedIn or directly to my email. It's just ryan@fortressiq.com.
Awesome. Well, everybody out there, hope you enjoyed this episode. We'll be back with another episode before you know it. And Ryan, appreciate your time again.
Likewise. Thanks, Arash.
Cheers. Thanks so much.